Welcome to Sports CTO Talks. In this series, we would be connecting with industry leaders from the sports tech industry, where we will simplify sports and technology for you. I am Ami, your guide on this journey through amazing leaders and understanding about the sports. We will dive deep into discussions and innovations driving the industry, from AI to cloud, from cybersecurity to sustainability. If it is sports tech, we are talking about it. Today, we have with us a very interesting guest, 𝗦𝗬𝗰𝗪. He's a seasoned sports executive and consultant with 20 years of experience at the intersection of sports, business, and technology. Nate has a proven track record in driving strategy, building teams, crafting go-to-market plans, delivering revenue growth, winning partnerships, and managing clients. His expertise spans across MLS, NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, Power 5 college conferences, and high school youth level, working and cutting edge wearable, videos, SaaS, performance, and media solutions. What is his specialty? Helping early stage sports tech and performance companies land and expand in the American soccer market. With deep knowledge of the industry and a sharp eye for innovation, he's been instrumental in shaping how technology enhances performance, engagement, and business outcomes in sports. Today, he would be talking about the rise of sports tech startups and how can we solve the real world problems. We welcome you, Nate, to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thanks for the very nice and comprehensive introduction.
Perfect. So let's begin with the basics, what defines a sports tech startup and how do they differ from traditional startups? I want to cover it 360 degrees in the podcast. So we'll begin from the start to the end.
Yeah. No, well, I think definitely as big as sports is, sports tech startups are still relatively small if you compare them to traditional businesses, right? I mean, everything usually starts with one people or a small group of people with an idea, but the amount of funding and the amount of people that often then follow in sports tech is quite different than in fintech, for example, right? So I think that, and there's also sports tech gets used as a term holistically, which makes sense, but then there really is two different sort of verticals within that, which is like performance sports tech, like stuff that's being used to sort of enhance performance on field for the athletes. And then there's all the technology around it that supports it, from game day operations and marketing. And so I think there's probably even more. You could break it down even further than that, right? But at a really high level, I think sports tech gets used a lot, and we almost maybe need to start defining it a little bit better between the different things because it's evolved so fast.
Okay, so how would you what are the major players in sports tech startups according to you, and how are they growing into the industry? And what do you see? What are the trends today in the startup world?
Yeah, well, I think that I've been doing this, heavily involved in sports tech specifically over the last 10 to 15 years. And I think when you first started out, there kind of was no major players, right? There were some companies were bigger than others, but it's an industry that's really evolved a lot, over that recent period. And now I think you see that there are major players. The same thing that has happened in business, where private equity and venture capital money has come into it, and a lot of growth happens through merger and acquisition. I think that's the biggest thing that has started to happen in our industry, is that it's now become a kind of real business, and has investment and has people coming from, whether that's ownership of teams all the way down to the tech stuff. So now you do see some, very actively looking for the next big thing and looking to bring it into their portfolio project, portfolio of companies, as opposed to just selling one specific wearable or video technology.
Okay, so what are the startups these days focusing on? What problems are they trying to solve? Is it training or fan expertise or wearable devices? What was before 2, 3 years, what is now, and what do you see shaping up in coming next 2, 3 years?
Yeah, I think it varies a bit by level, right? But if we and then it can vary by sport, and vary by region again. But if we just sort of try not to get too segmented, I think at a high level, the professional sports teams in the performance space are really trying to move from collecting new sets of data to making sure that they're understanding the data that they have. So there was a period where there was lots of new technology. But I think in many instances, people have invested in things and then kind of not known what to do with them, maybe not had the staff or expertise or the time to, get a lot of value from whatever technology they purchased. Now, I think the organizations are a bit smarter, and so they're investing more in the people and the supporting infrastructure and not just the technology itself. And so it's about taking, and also different data sets as well, right? So whereas the specific UX, UI of a single sport technology, performance technology used to be a really big deal, and it's not like you can forget it. At the highest level, most of these teams are taking that data and APIing it to their own sort of proprietary systems or merging it with a little bit more powerful technology, because a single data set in isolation isn't maybe as valuable as it is when it's merged with all the other different things that they're taking. So I think professional sport is interested in less. Although they're still investing in new technologies, I think most of their focus is on merging the different data sets that they have within it and trying to get genuine insight and make sure that they're not just collecting data, but they're acting on it. I think at the youth level, a lot of the technology is in and around kind of improving the parent-player experience more so than it is like driving performance. So the payment platforms and tournament registration and access to video, and it's maybe less performance driven than it is kind of experience driven, which is the way that it should be. So
Absolutely. So, when you're talking about data, how do the startups, or if we look it from the other angle, like the coaches, the trainers, or the players, like how is the data accepted by the other side of the sports?
yeah, I think that we moved past this idea that like, I don't need the data. We did this for 20 years, and my eyes will tell me everything I need to know. I think there's probably very few people working in elite sport these days that are not using data in some aspects, right? Even there's a spectrum. Some people might lean on it really heavily and go all in, whereas some people are just taking little pieces. But I think we've sort of moved past this idea that it doesn't have value, and everybody recognizes it as value. And kind of alluding to the earlier question that I answered, I think we've also moved past in many of the elite organizations where it was kind of, we were selling directly to coaches, and coaches were then tasked with the responsibility of doing this thing that was quite new for them, which was analyzing and actioning data. And these organizations are investing and have created new positions around sports science and sports performance and data analysis within the organization that help those coaches do it, because they're busy with their sort of day to day and doing the thing that they're best at. So if they can have people that are helping to sort of filter through and just deliver the information that's necessary, I think that's what's happening in most elite organizations now. So it's less of a fight with the coach to like, is this data valuable or not? The coach now is able to like just ask a question. That's ultimately what we want to do with this data, right? Is be able to like solve problems and ask a question. So as opposed to a coach opening his laptop and looking at a bunch of spreadsheets and or graphs and kind of trying to interpret himself, now he has people on staff he can just ask the question to. Is so-and-so overtraining? How are we doing in the attacking third, like at the moment, in terms of penetrating passes relative to the rest of the teams in the league? They can just ask those questions and people bring them the answers, and often supported with a video, which is what they understand, versus kind of having to do the dirty work themselves.
Absolutely. So, how these innovations or new products which are coming into market accessible to grassroots level sports? It can be into any sports.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of sports tech and early on sort of looked at it as like, if we can get the pros using it at the very top of the pyramid, then we can get the smaller pro leagues, or in the US, college, and then it'll filter down into youth sports. And if we can get every team in MLS wearing a GPS unit, then surely eventually every kid that's playing youth soccer is going to wear a GPS unit. And despite a lot of money and marketing and effort by some of these organizations, I think we see that there really is different needs. And so it's not so simple with like all the technologies. And I think, as opposed to sports tech companies now I mean, there's a few exceptions here and there, but in general, I think people are realizing that you sort of have to pick your niche. You're either going to sell, a product that is going to be good for elite athletes and professional athletes that have sports scientists to analyze data and are interested in doing that, versus this more sort of experiential technologies, which are now being like focused at youth sport. And there are some that sort of can span both and can be sort of dumbed down. But in general, I think it's, as opposed to trying to attack the whole pyramid, even within a given sport, people are sort of looking and saying, no, I want to focus on the bottom of the pyramid in youth sport, or I want to focus at the top, or I want to focus in the middle with sort of the college semi-pro. So.
Okay. So, like, when you were talking about this, there is a question which I have to ask is, like, are startups taking up or looking at AI as a thing and incorporating it in their technology and moving forward with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you sort of hear, if you're listening to other podcasts or people within the industry, people say that maybe sport at the moment is a bit behind in terms of like leveraging AI. But I wouldn't say that it's not being talked about. I think most, organizations, again, whether it's the teams themselves or whether it's in media and business, or across the entire sort of industry, people are thinking about how it can help. And I think that the biggest way that maybe in the future it can help, it's very elite and performance driven, takes a lot of time, money, expertise at the moment to turn data into insights. So when this coach asks a question, someone might go away and work on answer to them. If AI can come in and do that much quicker, you may see more companies be able to attack that whole pyramid. If it doesn't take a full-time sports scientist to analyze the GPS data, then potentially youth soccer teams can make better use of. And it's realistic for a youth soccer coach to log on to his laptop afterwards and get some quick, simple insights, as opposed to having to do some of the analysis himself or herself.
Absolutely. So, like, when you're talking about soccer, I just want to understand, like, what role is wearable technologies playing into monitoring or improving an athlete's health or injury prevention? Like, what is the role of that? Like, just taking an example of soccer into that.
Yeah. Well, I think almost every elite soccer team in the world these days is using some sort of wearable technology. GPS is the prominent. It used to be heart rate was probably the most popular, and then GPS came around, and that became popular. Player Maker, the company that I was just with, was introduced foot-worn technology, which delivers some unique insights. And I think you're sort of coming back to, as teams are now developing the infrastructure to deal with bigger data sets and merge them together, that you're seeing a lot of the best teams in the world that want to, integrate all three of those. So initially it was sort of a question of, are we going to keep using our heart rate monitors, or are we going to use like a GPS? And then a lot of people just left the heart rate monitors behind and only used GPS. And then the foot-worn technology came around, and some people looked at it as, now is this the better version of GPS? And are we going to leave our GPS units behind and just use the foot-worn technology? But actually, what I think you're seeing a lot happen is in a lot of elite clubs, you might see all three of those technologies being used. That now heart rate's being used, GPS is being used, and a foot-worn technology is being used, and some new, sort of different technologies. You see a company like Oros Muscles is gaining a lot of popularity with being able to do sort of live tracking and return to play stuff. So, yeah, there's more than just those three sort of main categories, but it's become, I think, players are now very used to it as well, right? Like wearing it on a daily basis. So that helps.
Okay. I want to understand from the revenue side also, like how does it work if a new company is emerging or a new startup for that matter is emerging? What are the key aspects or what are the key things they need to keep in mind, entering into the sports tech world?
Yeah, I think that being ambitious, setting big goals, having big targets is of course can be helpful in terms of stretching yourself. And this entrance of VC and private equity that's coming into the industry, sort of demands that in some instances, but like it takes time. I wouldn't say sports is quick, an industry that's like really quick, especially on the performance side, that's really quick to adopt new trends. And they're really, they're most like in the building and trying to maximize their performance. They're really random piece of advice I'd give to lead companies is like, be prepared to be patient. Feel free to sort of be ambitious and set big goals, but also maybe try to talk to some people that have done it before in terms of like what's actually realistic. Because going from sort of zero clients in Major League Baseball to even a third of the league, like in your first sort of 12-month sales cycle, is going to be highly unlikely for most startups. But they might look at it as like, that's only we're going to talk to everybody, and a 30% win rate is like, once 30 people see it, surely at least a third of them are going to buy it. But like in reality, it's much tougher than that. And I think a lot of people overestimate how quickly it'll be adopted. It's not to say that the technology is not good. It's just they really do work in these 1 year annual sort of seasonal cycles. And so if you pitch to them in January, you kind of don't get a chance to go back and pitch in June. You might have to wait like that whole other year before they make the decision. So be prepared to take a few years for things to get off the ground, not just sort of launch the product and have success in year one.
Absolutely. So, you being a seasoned player into this, what are few tips or advice, like for the new people entering into the market?
Yeah, I think my other sort of advice would be to like hire experienced people. It sounds maybe kind of general or maybe a bit and then the question is like, can we afford them? I think like becomes the next question, like, can we afford experienced people? I'm not always equating like more experience is better, but I think in an industry that has like grown so quickly that often these more experienced people can get to answers so much quicker that they become the same price. So as opposed to hiring somebody that's maybe like a bit more junior and hoping they can figure it out, but it's going to take them 12 months or 18 months or 24 months to figure it out. I think as you're hiring, if you can find people that really understand the problem you're trying to solve, your clients, maybe have a proven track record selling into them, have a network, they can help you get to answers in 6 months that a junior person would take 18 months to find. And if they can find that answer in 6 months and get you ready for that next sales cycle, it makes like all the difference in the world. So I think, although a lot of startups are kind of strapped for cash and trying to think, oh, we're early stage, and so we should be spending money on like big time executives or people. I think it's if you can find the right person that forward and what sort of role do we need to fill, like, and a lot of times it's sales, like we're going to bring on a salesperson because like now we need to sell. I think it's a little bit more like what's really going to result in us being able to scale. What are the questions we need to find out from clients in terms of what they like or don't like about our product or what needs to be added to it. And so that's more than just selling. That's somebody that really sort of understands the industry, the clients, growth in that way. So I think like I would always more than just sell. And I see a
Okay.
lot of people sort of make that
Nate,
mistake.
just 1 minute, just 1 minute. There is network instability from my end. Just give me 1 minute.
All good.
Now, am I audible clearly? Am I audible now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, because like I thought, it was lagging. So, okay.
Okay.
So like, when you were talking about this, a main question which is arising is what are the challenges faced and how can startups or new companies overcome that? It can be related to funding, it can be related to sales, as you said, or it can be related to regulatory issues also. So how can you do
Yeah.
that?
How can you,
Overcome
sorry, what's the
those,
question?
like as you were talking about sales and
Yeah.
like so many things. So I want to understand what are the challenges faced by new companies or startups. It can be
Yeah.
related to funding, regulatory aspects, or it can be adoption to new tech, what is coming out day to day. So like what are the challenges and how can you overcome those?
Yeah. I mean, I think what a lot of people think their problem is, and they're not often wrong, is funding, right? Um, but I also think that there's what's on their side at the moment is that there is this, sort of private equity VC money coming into it, in addition to all the like accelerator incubator programs. You just saw Paris Saint-Germain just launched one a couple of years ago. In the soccer space, Major League Soccer launched their own as well. I think that it's going to become, really common that organizations themselves, clubs, teams, even universities, I think with the sort of rise of the commercialization of Division I sport, are going to start to have these incubator programs. So I don't think there's going to be any sort of shortage of people looking to invest in the industry. So it's about, sort of talking to people to figure out how to refine your pitch and what you need to do to be prepared to be successful in those conversations. Because I no longer think it's sort of an issue that there's not people that want to invest in sport. Now it's just a question of like, do you have the right idea and do you understand how to communicate it in the right way?
Okay. And when we look at the other side of the coin, is like, how can a company, or if it is having a product, how can they convince athletes or players or coaches, to use the new technology? Like, is it being
Yeah,
difficult, or are the coaches, are the teams, or the leagues getting adopted to it? How is it?
it very much is a sort of keep up with the Joneses industry in the sense that our teams are all looking what everybody else is doing, and as soon as they start to see that, you know, a certain critical mass of teams are using it, they start to feel left out and will get very curious and just then reach out to, the specific company just to understand like how come everybody else is using this, right? And that sort of leads a little bit to my sort of patience, sort of question is like, you might have a great idea, you might have a great solution, but you really need to get it in the hands of people and get feedback from them for a period of time before you just sort of go straight to, we're going to get, 25% of the league in our first season of sales. So that sort of early stage, sort of beta, if you want to call it that, or partnerships, and then having people that are focused on the support aspect and the onboarding and delivering a good experience as opposed to just like, getting straight into sales and revenue generation growth, because sport is a funny, especially the team sort of performance side is funny in the way that it doesn't exactly follow the same rules as the rest of the business industry, right? There is with financial fair play, and there's some restrictions to a certain extent for some owners, but you also see others that, some of the best clubs in the world where people are just dumping tons of money into it and like happy to lose. And so other teams are then trying to figure out how to keep up with them. Um, so it's not always just about the sort of dollars and cents with these clubs.
Okay. So like when we are talking about this, like there is another angle which I want to understand. Like if a startup is starting or a company, it is in the initial phase, ideation phase, that we should do this, that, like, there might be 10 things on
Mhm.
their board. So like, what are the trends going on right now? And what are a few things which can work? What do you feel like, a better understanding, because you are into the market from such a long time. You have experience of such a long time.
Yeah. Um, I mean, we touched on it a little bit before in terms of, I think, like what the organization's based on level of play, what professional versus like youth sports is getting into. So I think you do see that's where there's, a lot of time, energy, startups coming in trying to focus on that space. Like over the last, sort of say 6 weeks, I've probably talked to a double-digit number of organizations that are trying to get into like the payment registration youth club management space.
Okay.
There's not necessarily like a super clear winner yet there. And none of those, so the big companies like Huddle, for example, like doesn't have something like that in their portfolio. So I can see a lot of people trying to sort of win that race and either then try to become the next Huddle on themselves or be acquired by somebody like that. But yeah, I think at the top level, where people are sort of looking, I mean, if you can do something that's totally new and creative, that's always great. But I think if people that are sort of looking strategically at like if they don't have this sort of idea themselves, like I recognize this problem that needs to be solved. I think what the industry is asking in terms of like problem solving is those elite clubs are trying to figure out how to merge these for data sets and turn it into insights. And these youth clubs are still just trying to wrap their head around how can we shift this narrative from youth sports is expensive and the clubs are greedy to youth sports is awesome and like my kid has a great time. Because I think in the US, at least with the pay to play model, there is this kind of, as much as so many kids are playing it and lots of fun is being had, there is this sort of underlying narrative of parents being a little bit like underwhelmed with the experience and feeling like it is like too expensive. So I think there's a lot of time and effort, and technology has the potential to help with that experience to try to come in and change this narrative so that everybody feels like it's good. And then it wears on the coaches and administrators who I don't think are greedy and selfish and about money, because most of them aren't making tons of money, and they're spending lots of nights and weekends hanging out trying to like do what's right for kids. And so they are also getting a little bit beat down by this narrative. So I think in the US, at least, there's this, everybody recognizes sport is great and people are trying to turn it into a more positive experience for the people that are playing it, and not just for the best players, right? Because only the top small percentage go on to play in college and the pros. So what about the other 97% of kids, and how's their experience, and how can we use it to make them better people long term?
Okay. And like, a last question is like, I would really like to understand, in the next 3 years, what is the trend and where is it going? And, a specific 2, 3 things that a startup should do, a startup should not do, and, like pros and cons, which we can see in the next immediate
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a recap, but I would say startups in the performance space should be patient and hire experience. I think they should not be too quick to take on a bunch of money that inhibits their ability to be patient. So it's great to like, I think, try to figure out how much is enough. and make sure that you're not raising so much that you end up with really angry, impatient investors that were expecting results faster than they can come. So yeah, so do be patient, do hire with experience. Don't take on too much money too early. And I think I think it's there at the moment. And I think the fact that more people are being involved in sport technology is a good thing, because the sport has been a really insular area. But I think there is some unique aspects of it. So I think if you're interested in sports tech and you weren't necessarily an athlete or a coach yourself, or a strength and conditioning coach or an analyst like on the outside, make sure that you involve some people within your company that really understand those personas of the needs that you're trying to fill. I think there's a ton of value outside of sport that people can bring to it. But if they don't also bring a little sort of expertise and context with them, it can be really, sort of tough to succeed and solve people's solutions if you don't have anybody in your team that's sort of like lived those problems themselves.
So when you talk, like, I still want to ask you one more question. Like, when you talk
Yeah.
about money, like, how do
Yeah.
startups attract investors? Because that is the basic question which everyone will be having. And
Yeah.
what kind of funding opportunities are existing into this space, the sports tech space right now?
Yeah, I think these accelerator incubator programs are like fantastic. So if you're a company that's trying to solve a problem in soccer, then looking at, for example, we mentioned, PSG and MLS is great. The Dodgers have an innovation hub, the Sixers have an innovation hub, like in basketball. So I think and they're starting to be more specialized. It's not just sports or sports tech. There's even people in gaming. Like I did some work for, a group, Stadia, that invested a lot in gaming. So I think that's like a really good place to start, as opposed to going straight to like the traditional, like bigger investment. That's going to be tough, like from, sort of day one. So outside of like basic angel investing and like family offices, I think the rise of these incubator accelerator programs is a fantastic place to start for like early stage sports tech companies.
Interesting. So like, Nate, I wanted to understand, a bit in detail about incubators. Like,
Yeah.
what was it? Yeah.
No, I can speak specifically to my, experience at Stadia, for example. So different ones are going to have different sort of qualifications. Some might just be looking for stuff on the performance side. Others might be looking for stuff specifically in media. Other stuff might be specific to a sport. But there'll be basically an organization out there that says, we're actively looking for startup companies that we want to come apply to our program, and they'll look at a bunch of applications, and then they'll narrow that group of, say, 100 applications down to 12 sort of people that get a chance to pitch, almost like Shark Tank style. Think of it. You get to stand up in front of a group of people and sort of pitch why you think your idea is great. Maybe have some other meetings. And within that, then the accelerator or the incubator will come back and make an offer to you to invest in your company. Usually that is some aspect of cash, but as opposed to just money, what these accelerators and incubators bring is some expertise as well. So we would, at Stadia, the companies that they invested in would have to come to St. Louis, Missouri, is where I was living at the time, sort of once a month, and they would meet with specialists in each area to get advice from. So maybe one in sales, one in finance, one in additional fundraising, one in technology. They could leverage that network to get meetings for potential sales or find early stage partners. So it's I think, as opposed to just getting a check, you also get this expertise and sort of get to go into a network. And by applying to the ones that are a good fit for you, it's also like the right network for you. So that's why I think these accelerators, incubators can be like really good early stage, especially before you've taken on other investment and have a bit of equity to, essentially not play with, but like give away.
And like, does that benefit at the end of the day the people, starting the journey? And like, are they given right advices, right guidance, and like, just the whole process of it?
Yeah, I think I mean, be each founder will have to make their own call in terms of like how much equity to give away and how valuable the network and the people within the given accelerator. So I'm not saying all accelerators are made equal per se. But yes, in general, I think that they're a really good place to start for founders.
Nate, we'll move on to the next segment. That's the rapid fire round. I'll
Okay.
ask you a few questions. You'll have to be quick in answering.
Yep. Sounds good.
Perfect. AI as a coach or AI as a scout? Which excites you more?
Scout.
If you had to describe AI in sports in one word, what would it be?
Turning data into insights.
Okay.
That's more than one word, isn't it?
But that's okay.
Insights. Let's go with insights then.
Okay. AI in sports, game changer or it's overhyped?
Game changer.
Okay. Would you rather have shoes that make you run faster or gloves that make you catch perfectly?
Speed kills. I'll go with shoes that make you run faster.
Okay. Would you rather have a hologram coach or a drone referee?
A drone referee.
Okay. What's one sports rule you would change using technology?
I mean, offsides in soccer has been controversial for a long time. So I guess trying to find a better solution for offsides in soccer.
Okay. If you could have dinner with a famous personality, past or present, who would it be?
The nerve, did you say?
If you could have dinner with a famous
Oh,
personality,
dinner. Okay.
yeah, with a famous personality, it can be past or present. Who would it be?
Ooh, good question. Any ex-athlete? I grew up loving Roberto Baggio, the Italian soccer player. Diodore did a great job of marketing him, like when I was in that age group. And he's had a really interesting, post career. He's a Buddhist, and so I think it'd be really interesting to sit down and talk to him about life.
Wow, that's good. Now we'll move on to the next segment. That's you'll have to answer the question. It's one question only, but you'll have to answer
Okay.
this into 30 seconds.
Okay.
Like, what do you see, the role of AI in rising the sports tech startups?
I think it'll be the stuff that AI is ready to do, i.e., like as opposed to using it to solve big problems in the beginning, I think using it to make the company more efficient. So even just helping to create social media posts and to, write and respond to emails. I think the stuff that it's ready to do. I myself am probably not leaning into it like enough as I should be. And I think the people that know how to use it smart to sort of make just the basic operations of their company run more efficiently will then, sort of create more headspace and time to solve the bigger problem. So I think over the next few years, it's less about revolutionizing things than it is about like streamlining operations on a day-to-day basis.
Perfect. Thank you, Nate, for the insights and joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That was Nate sharing his insights. Let's stay connected for more understanding on sports and technology. Please share this episode with your friends and families and the people who love sports and technology. Let's connect next week for the next episode. Till that, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep exploring.